Welcome to my channel. Today I will show you how to weave a round or an oval basket using the plastic canvas. This type of canvas is usually used for needlepoint. You can buy this canvas, for example, on Amazon. Please note that not every size of canvas is suitable for this project. You need a 5-count plastic mesh with the size of each square approximately 4 millimeters. The weavers used for this project should also be somewhat thinner. My weavers are rolled from the paper strips 7 cm wide. I used the metal rod 1.2 mm in diameter. You can find a lot of patterns for this type of weaving, for example, in Pinterest. If you want your weavers to cover the plastic canvas as much as possible, you need to consider several factors. For example, these two patterns, where the weavers are placed either horizontally or vertically on the canvas, will not look neat because you will be able to see the plastic canvas right through the weave. It's better to choose the patterns where the weavers will be placed corner-wise, like in this pattern. The patterns can be made in one or several colors. If the back side of the basket is going to be visible, like in the basket that I am weaving in this tutorial, then it's better to have the symmetrical pattern woven on the back side of the canvas too. It will conceal the plastic canvas on both sides of the basket. For instance, in this pattern, the plastic canvas will not be fully covered with the weavers on the back side of the basket. Therefore, the basket will not look neat. However, this pattern can be woven symmetrically on both sides of the basket, which will look nice both at the front and at the back of the basket. Also, keep in mind that you can insert only a certain number of weavers into each individual square of the canvas. Usually, it's no more than 4 weavers. That's why, for example, this pattern will not be suitable. Now you know the basics of weaving with the paper rods on a plastic canvas. So let's move on. After you choose which pattern you are going to weave, cut a piece of canvas of the right width. In order to calculate the width, add 2 extra squares to the number of squares you need for your specific pattern. You will need those 2 extra squares to connect the base to the canvas at the bottom and to make the border on the top of the canvas. For example, the width of my pattern is 11 squares. I added 2 extra squares and got the total width of 13 squares. If necessary, trim the edge of the canvas. One side of the canvas is rough, another side is smooth. I will be using the rough side as the front side of the basket. All the weavers should be properly prepared before you start working on the project. You can find the information on how to make and prepare the weavers on my channel. I squeeze each weaver before using it for stitching the plastic canvas. It makes the weavers flat and prevents the cracks. Insert the weaver into the canvas, leaving a small pattern with approximately 1 cm long on the back side of the canvas, and start stitching the canvas following the pattern that you chose for your basket. Press the weaver against the canvas every time you make a stitch. Elongate the weavers on the back side of the canvas. If you have already inserted a weaver into a specific square, but need to insert at least one more weaver into the same square, make some space for it using an awl. If you need to cut a weaver so that to resume stitching at another side of the canvas, tuck in the end of the weaver under the stitches on the back side of the canvas. Leave a couple of squares empty at the very beginning of the pattern. You will need them to connect the parts of the canvas. Continue stitching. I have almost filled the piece of plastic canvas with the stitches. On one side, I have 2 rows of empty squares. On another side, I have 4 rows of empty squares, plus, of course, 1 empty row both at the top and at the bottom of the future basket. As you can see, the pattern on the back side of the canvas is almost identical to the pattern on the front side, although it's not as tidy because you can see where I connected the weavers. But that's normal because, after all, it's the back side of the basket. Now you need to prepare the other piece of the canvas of the right width and length. It goes without saying that the width of the second piece of the canvas will be identical to the width of the first piece of the canvas that has already been stitched. Its length depends on the size of the basket you're making and on the pattern you're using for stitching. Trim the edges of the canvas if necessary. I have cut a piece of the canvas of the needed length. At this stage, you have two options. The first option is to stitch the second piece of canvas and then to connect two pieces together. The second option is to connect two pieces of canvas together and continue stitching. I chose the second option. Before you can connect the pieces of canvas, you need to temporarily secure them so that they could stay in place. I used the binder clips. Connect the pieces of canvas so that the first two rows of the empty squares of the first piece were overlapping with the last two rows of the empty squares of the second piece of the canvas. Use the binder clips to hold the pieces of canvas together. Continue stitching according to the pattern. I have almost finished stitching the canvas. Now I need to connect the canvas into one whole piece. I have already showed you how to do it earlier in this video. Thus, I got one whole piece of the canvas which I can turn into a round or oval basket. The next step is weaving a round or oval base for the basket. I will not be showing you how to do it in this video. If you don't know how to do it, you can watch my other tutorials on that. You can find them on my channel. Now I'm going to make a border, which will be at the top of the basket. In order to do that, we will need to take 5 weavers. 2 weavers shall be placed on each side of the canvas. We need these weavers to conceal the canvas and to create some volume at the top of the basket. Use the clothes pins to hold the weavers in place. Start wrapping around the edge of the canvas, squeezing the weavers in the same manner as you were doing it when stitching. Continue wrapping around the edge of the canvas. Elongate the paper rods as needed. I have almost reached the beginning of the border. Specifically in this case, I don't need to do anything with the paper rods that I was wrapping. If your paper rods are too long, trim them so that they will barely touching each other rather than overlapping each other. Otherwise, this section of the border will be thicker than the rest of the border. Insert the end of the very first weaver between the border and the plastic canvas. In order to finish making the border, trim the weaver and insert it under the stitches on the back side of the canvas, just like you were doing when stitching. Now we need to measure the inside circumference of the stitched canvas. Please note that we need to measure the inside rather than the outside circumference of the canvas because there will be a difference between these two values. I use the measuring tape for that. We need to know this value to calculate the size of the round or oval base we need to weave. The inside circumference of my canvas is 76 centimeters. It means I need to weave a base with the diameter of approximately 24 centimeters. You can find an online calculator if you need help with these values. If you need the tutorials on weaving a round or oval base, you can find them on my channel. I wove a round base with the diameter of 24 centimeters. I check if the size of the woven base is right prior to trimming the stakes. If the base is too small, weave another row. If it's too big and doesn't fit into the canvas, unravel it a little bit. Trim the stakes after adjusting the size of the base. Apply some glue next to every stake and leave the base so that the glue could dry. It will take several hours. I usually leave it overnight to dry. You can put it under the press, but it's not required. Now insert the base into the canvas and secure it in place with the elastic band. We are going to connect the base to the canvas in a way similar to making the border. The only difference is that we will need 3 additional weavers rather than 4. Insert a weaver into the canvas, place 1 additional weaver inside, 2 additional weavers on the outside of the canvas, and start wrapping around the canvas, inserting the weaver between the first and the second rows of the base. At the very beginning, I place the additional weavers under the elastic band to keep them in place. Use the awl to make space for the weaver between the rows of the base. Continue wrapping around the canvas and finish wrapping in the same way as you finish the border at the top. Trim the last weaver and insert its end under the stitches at the back of the canvas. Weaving baskets on the plastic canvas is a time-consuming type of weaving, but it's well worth it. I hope you enjoyed watching this tutorial. See you next time.